Welcome to White Pill Radio, the roughly every other episode version of Theology on Air, which is an outgrowth of Theology by the Pint, which is a monthly gathering in Houston where we have craft beer and food and great conversations around theology and politics and ethics and morals and things going on in the world. And so if you live in Houston, you should definitely check out theologybythepint.org and learn about our upcoming events and stop in. You'll find them to be a lot of fun. But this podcast, because there's so much to talk about, we want to look at current events from a post-apologetic, ultimately hopeful point of view. Basically, we're looking at it from a Christian worldview. We're looking at what's going on from a Christian worldview. Not cynically, hopefully not, hopefully hopeful.
Hopefully it is White Pill Radio.
But it is White Pill Radio.
Supposed to work those white pills in there.
But you know what I always say?
What?
It's blessed talk, not happy talk. Oh wait, no, that's what you always say.
No, but I'm glad you said that because that does need to be said. And that is very true. This is blessed talk, not happy talk. So I am Evan McClanahan. I'm the pastor at First Lutheran, and I'm joined by the Grand Poobah of Theology by the Pint.
Hey guys, Sarah Stone.
Yes. And frequent guest. Hadn't seen you in a while, though, so glad to have you back.
I know. Y'all got new mics, so now my voice sounds even better.
Oh my, even better. Listen to you.
It's even boomier.
Yes.
And as you say that, I'm looking at our levels like, are they loud enough yet? Are they loud enough? They look okay. Okay. But anyway, a lot to talk about on this version of White Pill Radio. We got union strikes. We got Bibles in classrooms. We got...
Wait, before you get to all the articles,
yes.
I want to give a shout out to a couple listeners.
Oh, yeah.
Two people that came across my path this week that listened faithfully to our podcast, Leah Green and Kelly Hurst. I ran into Kelly Hurst at, I went to a different church this last Sunday because they were actually honoring Theology by the Pint among some other outreach partners. And she said something like, I just love your podcast. And I've sort of forgotten that she's a faithful listener. So
cool.
To Kelly and to Leah, thanks for listening.
Not related to Patty Hurst.
I don't think so.
Okay, well.
Spelled differently.
That'd be a really interesting story if she was. So,
Am I too young to know who that is?
She was murdered by...
No, she
Just
was...
kidding. Oh, she went missing.
Yeah, she was William Randolph Hearst's daughter. Like, he's the guy that Citizen Kane is based on.
Gotcha.
He was the newspaper mogul.
Got it.
And she was kidnapped by this like kind of cult/terrorist organization, kind of like Weather Underground or something like that, but not that. And she's an example of Stockholm syndrome because she shows up on like bank video later having like robbed a bank for them. So like she was
indoctrinated.
Yeah, to their cause, and anyway.
And
I think
also,
like what we try to do in the church.
That's a dig though when you're like, am I too young to know? You're calling everybody else.
That was not your
bro?
reading motive into what I said.
I don't know. It felt like a microaggression is all I'm saying.
I mean, it was even before I was born, but
I mean, I'm only like 2 years younger than y'all.
Yeah.
So
I
just thought it was in that 2 year gap.
some of us
to history.
Some of us study history for fun. It's just one of those things. But okay, I actually am quoting my own article here, so shame on me for that maybe. But I do write at everymancommentary.com from time to time, and I wrote an article with a grammatical error in the headline, says Sarah. So I'm going to fix it on the fly here. Fewer stunts and more integration, teaching the Bible in schools. And basically I was inspired by this war of these neighboring states where the Republican governors are one-upping each other by being more and more Christianer in the classroom.
More Christianer.
Yes.
There's another grammatical mistake.
And so basically, sort of kind of famously, the Ten Commandments are now posted in Louisiana classrooms at the request or law that Jeffrey Landry signed. And then the Oklahoma governor, actually wasn't, I think he signed a law, but, the superintendent basically said, oh, yeah? Well, we want to teach the Bible, and all these, we're going to work it into the curriculum, but we're going to have Bibles in the classroom. And that's kind of what I heard at first was Bible in the classroom. And my first response as a pastor was, that's a terrible idea. And it should be a good idea. But we're going through like a Bible in a Year campaign as part of our Sunday school. So, and if you do that, one of the things you realize is that like, 70% of the Bible is the Old Testament.
You just got to the New Testament. Okay.
Yeah. Well, the way this one does it, it kind of intersperses. But yes, basically, I mean, it would be October until you even get to like, the Gospel of Matthew. So, and a lot of the Old Testament is really hard reading. And the idea that
a lot of J names.
Let's go over it. Yeah. But yeah, so the idea that like if you just put a Bible in a classroom, like that's silly. Like that is what do you call that when you want credit for doing something good? Virtue signaling.
Yes.
on the right. And it's even worse because, maybe not worse. I mean, I actually do applaud the effort. I'm not that down on it. I just think it doesn't go far enough and it's not the right technique. But one of our regular guests on the show, Ken, he pointed out that there is a demand from the state of Oklahoma that the bids for these Bible providers need to include the following: 55,000 Bibles with shipping included. The supplier must provide only the King James Version Bible for historical accuracy and contain both the Old and New Testaments.
That's because the Gideons do the New Testament only, I think.
Oh, well, do they?
I don't think
New
that's
Testament
true.
and Psalms, I think.
Well, there are those small versions.
They
that
will print
pop up
those,
from
but I
time to
think
time. Yeah. But like in a
Generally,
hotel or
hotel
something.
room, it's a complete 66
next time you go to a hotel room, take a look.
But here's the really
Anyway,
wild
maybe not.
part. The supplier's Bible must include copies of the United States Pledge of Allegiance, the U.S. Declaration of Independence, the U.S. Constitution, and the U.S. Bill of Rights.
Oh, just like the original Bibles. Yeah.
So is
Like
that
the one
what the
Jesus
Trump Bible
had.
has?
Exactly.
I mean, there's a part of me now that's like, are they buying Trump Bibles like that didn't get sold or something? Is this like a kickback? No, that's an accusation that should not be made probably. But,
It's out there now.
and I don't like this kind of Trump Bible with like American founding documents in it. That's dumb and silly and whatever. But anyway, my thought was that it's really kind of a question. It's like, well, how do you actually best teach the Bible?
Yeah.
Because it is a hard book. You know, Mace was making fun of me that, you know, I say in my article that it's a hard book and I have struggles with it. And
Especially with the Old Testament.
Mace is like questioning my intelligence. And like, well, no, but it's a foreign world. The
Yes.
names are unusual. The events are totally, we have no idea what they're talking about. The practices of
culture.
sacrifice and all that kind of stuff. So it's a totally foreign thing. How do we normally teach Bible in Bible school? We kind of make it simple. We start with flannel boards.
Or like children's Bibles. I mean, these
Yes.
are going in children's classrooms, right?
Yeah. Right.
Like you don't ever just hand your 4 or 5 year olds to even 7 or 8 year old
Right.
a
King
regular
James.
Bible.
Well,
You do like
actually,
Jesus
as a
storybook.
pastor.
Oh,
I'm
boy.
totally kidding. I'm kidding.
But even if you do use a regular Bible with your kids, you kidify it as you teach it.
Right.
Like
So
you read a little
I
passage,
was
you're like, well, here's
explaining-
what happens.
I was explaining before we started recording that in our family devotions, we're reading through the book of Genesis. We're almost the way through, and I'm like constantly having to
Pause.
pause and like summarize, clarify, including all the J names. So
Yeah.
that was a regular topic of conversation.
Well, also, there's a lot of really mature content in the Bible.
Oh,
you
yes.
know?
Yeah.
Yeah, there's
So,
some X-rated stuff. in
Judah
there,
and
at least
Tamar.
R-rated.
That was an interesting morning.
Or just the violence. Like it's not just sex.
You're
it's
not
also-
just like, we're gonna skip that page. You know.
It's inspired. It's part of the narrative. That's
Yeah.
a whole other
Yeah.
like
Yep.
conversation.
soapbox of mine about when we teach the Joseph story, we just skip Genesis 38 because we don't know what to do with it. It's like, well, it's part of the story.
Yeah,
It's there for a
right,
reason.
right.
But anyway,
Is that when he's sold by his brothers into slavery and thrown into the pit? Is that Genesis
no, that's
38?
Judah and Tamar.
Oh, okay.
So it's
gotcha.
like this now
Gotcha,
back
gotcha.
at the Hall of Justice moment where it like cuts away. And it's like, what does
Right.
this have to do with Joseph?
Right.
Like in my experience, most churches that preach through Genesis or just do the Joseph cycle, it's like Genesis 37, Genesis
And then on
39.
to the Exodus story.
You know,
Yeah.
like, you know, so anyway.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, you know, I can just imagine the debates too, where they're like, it's got to be King James only, and other people are like
so
NIV,
silly.
ESV. You know what I'm saying? Like, that had to happen. Someone had to decide like that, and like, how do you land on the King James? I mean, we actually use the King James because someone bought us a beautiful goatskin King James. Like, I didn't ask for it, but you know, so I'll use it sometimes when I read the gospel. But yeah.
Yeah, no, it's like I think most scholars agree it is not given what we have now, it is not the best, not even close to the best translation.
Yeah.
But yeah, I was actually hanging out with a couple of pastors that were going to be guest speakers at one of our events, and one of them said, and these are Protestant pastors, and they said, one thing I'm starting to actually agree about with the with the Catholic Church, oh, maybe this is a dig on the Catholic Church as I say it, is that just putting Bibles in people's hands willy-nilly, that has its own cost too. Like when you don't explain things, because the Bible can be very confusing. I mean, we joke about it, but without someone there to teach and explain what was happening culturally at the time or historically why this is significant or why would God ask Abraham to sacrifice his son? That's wild.
Like
well,
the
if you
office of
understand,
pastor, elder, teacher
sorry.
was instituted for a reason.
Yes,
Yeah.
yes.
absolutely.
Yeah.
And we're meant to do this in community. We're meant to do it with people that know more than we do. And to teach it. So yeah, I agree. I don't mind there being a Bible in the classroom, but that it's being sort of regulated by law is weird.
Well,
Yeah.
and like the danger of it is that what happens when it collects dust, because that's what happens with a lot of Bibles in homes, It's almost like, oh, that's a reminder. It's like, I think people's relationship to the Bible is conflicted because they know they ought to be studying it, and most Christians don't. I mean, most Christians do not even read the Bible. Like, they don't really hardly know what's in it. So, like, you need to have a plan. It's like anything else in life. If you want to lose weight or gain strength or learn how to drive or garden, like you need to have a plan with achievable goals. So my argument is that what we should do is just reprint the New England Primer, which was basically used for 200 years in American schools, which were not public schools, but community, private schools more or less. And just Google it and look at some of the images. They basically would write poems to teach the ABCs, like telling Bible stories, like very memorable, rhyming, creative ways. But the point is that the Bible was just worked in. And so if we really are serious about the Bible, we have to like actually assume it's true. And we're not like adding the Bible to the curriculum. And that's why I think this will ultimately fail, that these efforts of like putting the 10 Commandments in the classroom and putting the Bible in a classroom, I don't think it's actually going to achieve anything.
Right.
Because it's like, we're just going to pile it on top of all the secular curricula that we're teaching you. And like, we're not assuming the truth of the Bible.
Yes.
Like, we're going to put it out there for you, but people can still mock it and so on and so forth. Like, most of the teachers probably don't even believe in the Bible. Maybe most is a harsh thing. You were in the school system, maybe you could say. But anyway, the old primers just assumed the truth of the Bible. They assumed children needed to know the Bible. They also assumed children need to learn how to read. So they just did both at the same time. And with cartoons and, poetry, and it was fun. And so that's what we would actually want to do. I mean, that would basically mean, though, that public school curricula would start to look like Sunday school curricula. And are we willing to do that? And there's no way.
Sure.
I can't imagine a state that would go that far.
So that's kind of like my angle on it. So one, just for the record, totally against the Constitution, Declaration of Independence being printed
conflated
with the Bible, absolutely. But kind of the like Bible, 10 Commandments, and school stuff sounds like kind of similar to y'all. It's like, I appreciate the concept, but I kind of put it in the category of my hope, my white pill take on this would be, my hope is that it gets people to just kind of like rethink the whole system entirely. That rather than just putting a Bible in a public school classroom and pretending that like that's going to solve all of our problems, like, because, and I know Evan and I would agree for sure. I don't know as much Sarah, just because I haven't heard you talk about it as much. Like, there's no such thing as worldview neutral, right? And so it's who's gonna win. And my hope would be is that Christian parents, like, if you want a Christian education for your children, like, maybe we have to like get out of the system that they're trying to put us through. So whether that's Christian education, homeschooling, or even like my understanding of the whole idea of a public school and like what's going on a lot of these public school boards and things like that, is you have these parents coming up. It is meant to be like the community coming together saying that this is what we want to teach. Like, I wonder even if there's like a radical idea of,
revival coming.
Not even that, but even saying like just an admission that there's no such thing as a worldview neutral school, which is what the public school advocates are going to say that they are, but it's not true. Well, let's just like stop pretending and say like, okay, if you want to send your kid to the secular school, go here. If you want to send your kids to, like, just give us, it's kind of why I'm generally a fan of kind of the school choice voucher movement, et cetera. It's like, give parents options.
I'm definitely hoping that school choice becomes reality in Texas, that we could start a school. And I would love to see more of that. And public school enrollment is declining and homeschooling is increasing, and there are Christian classical schools and things like that are growing. So I do think that it's kind of happening organically, but and this is why it has been voted down in Texas by Republicans in rural areas. They know that the moment we give a check to parents to go form schools or go to schools, they'll do it. Like, they'll leave their public school. And then you're going to have, it's like a church split, right? You'll have 50-50 people that leave, and you don't have enough, you don't have a critical mass to keep the church going. And that's the fear, and it's like a legit fear, but I think the public school system is way overdue for an overhaul.
Yes.
And yes, there is no neutrality. You can't teach anything. Just yesterday, I was talking to a college student who was 15, and he said, "I have a question."
College student who is 15.
He's a high school student at the
Also
international
taking-
school, and he doubles up and does
Okay.
dual credits. Thank you. But really smart kid, and I have one of my taglines on my sign that I use to try to get people to come talk to me is that atheists do not exist. And it was like, well, what do you mean by that? And so I was, anyway, not to go into the whole thing, but the bottom line is that, well, we all have ultimate concerns and we all have an ultimate worldview. And so it's just a matter of, and, ultimately atheists are their own God, or the human collective becomes God when you, boil down moral considerations and all that. So, and then his ride came.
That's right.
I was like, man, we just got to the good
his mom
stuff.
came to pick him up.
Yeah. I was like, come back.
Well, just
next week.
To white pill this a little bit. You said something interesting, like about when it collects dust, will it just sitting there be a reminder to people like, ooh, I ought to be reading my Bible, but people don't know how to do that, have a plan. But you can do this. Like, you can learn what the Bible means, and it can actually be super fun.
Oh, yeah.
Interesting. And you can do that with any of the churches that are represented here and at any of the churches that are represented at our events. So if you ever want to know how to do that, if you live in the Houston area or anybody that listens to us, contact us on our website and we'll put you in touch with people that like to do this.
Yeah.
When we each teach Sunday schools and or Bible studies, go to churches that do the same thing or lead at churches that do the same thing. So come on board, join us.
And there was a guy who's a great Bible teacher.
Oh, here we go.
Yeah.
This is a good segue
and,
to one of our sponsors. No, I'm kidding.
Yeah. So Mace, tell us
Take
the
it
story.
away.
Yeah. So I'll kind of preface this by saying I was at a gathering not that long ago, maybe a month or two ago, and there was within the evangelical subculture, a relatively well-known speaker speaking at it. And he made this line. He was talking about just like the chaos of our time and things like that. And like, he's like talking about this and this and this, and kind of like his like one-liner at the end that was like meant to draw laughs is he goes, if I read one more headline that begins Dallas area pastor.
Oh gosh.
And it got like this big laugh in the room, right? Well, like literally less than 2 or 3 weeks after this event, there's another headline, Dallas area pastor. So Dallas area pastor Stephen Lawson, he was now the former lead pastor at Trinity Bible Church in the Dallas area. He was also a faculty member at the Master's Seminary associated with Grace Community Church and John MacArthur. He was also a teaching fellow with Ligonier. He was fired from his church after coming forward about a, quote, inappropriate relationship he had with a woman. And as the details started to come out, Lawson, who's 73, turns out this woman is in her 20s.
Jeez.
Apparently she is an alum of the Master's University. She was never directly his student, but had a close association with the family. Allegedly, the relationship never got physical, but it was definitely romantic in nature. And apparently the only reason why he ever even came forward was because the woman's father confronted him and said, if you don't bring this out, I will.
Good dad.
Yeah, 100%.
Also, given the age difference, I'm surprised it wasn't the grandpa.
But
and Steve Lawson's married.
Yes, for
Just
like
to
40 something
make
years.
sure that
Yeah.
part
And,
is in there.
he's a big name guy.
Yeah.
Like, he has a lot of like 400 something.
Like
thousand
someone at some
followers.
point has sent you a YouTube or something
Yeah.
of
Right,
him.
right.
Real.
So the reason why this was on my mind is I never super closely followed him. I interacted with his stuff, but a lot of the organizations he's associated with, I have a lot of respect for. And he's known for being a very biblical teacher, for lack of a better way of putting it. Like, takes the Bible very seriously, takes expository preaching very seriously, very theologically astute. And so I was sharing before we recorded, this one hit me harder than some of the other ones, because some of the other ones were people I wasn't a huge fan of anyway.
Yeah.
Like, I suspected character issues, or they definitely had major theological issues.
Yeah, which at some point devolve into.
Right.
Yeah.
So this one was just bad, and it only gets worse the more information comes out. Even things like, there was a Bible study video that was published just a couple weeks before all this came out, where he's preaching the Sermon on the Mount, and he's talking about adultery, and he's telling them, like, don't let 15 seconds of gratification like ruin, all this stuff. Or apparently the Sunday before he was fired, at some point in his sermon, he made this point about, don't judge a man's ministry based on one slip up. And so there was all this like
Takes a different light.
incongruence and like kind of covering his tracks like before
prepping
it all
almost.
came out. And so it's just super duper icky. And so, it's one of the latest, kind of Twitter dust storms and different things like that on the one hand has been really hard, but I guess that kind of leads to my attempt at a white pill, kind of similar to the education thing, that my hope would be as it gets people to reevaluate things. Is my hope would be in the church world, certainly those of us in church leadership, that this would cause some serious reflection and resolve. So, for example, the church that I pastor, there's another pastor on staff with me, and we meet once a week. And our very first thing we do in our weekly meeting is just kind of check in with what's going on with one another. And I made a point after this came out, say like, okay, like, how are you processing this? And most importantly, what are we going to do as pastors of this church to make sure that we are never that headline? Right.
Because anyone can be. That's the thing. Like,
yes,
even as you say that, in my mind, I'm like, well, Mace would never.
Right,
and that's
right.
true. But also, everyone is sinful. Everyone is fallible. And that's kind of what this points to, right? Because he was like a seemingly really honorable dude. And I still think he is a believer. And I still think he is,
100%.
Made in God's image, loved by God, redeemed by God. And yet he fell,
And then also the kind of reevaluating things is, so again, like admittedly in my own heart, there was like other recent scandals that I was like, well, I already had theological issues with you anyway. But where a lot of the circles that I run in like around the church planning world, is there's a lot of like, people will say the right things, but then the way they actually act is different. And what I mean by that is, in the church planning world, they'll say like, of course we care about character, and of course we care about like theological acumen. Well, one, this shows that theological acumen we need more than that. We need that, but we need more than that. And then they give lip service to character, right? They give lip service to character, but it's really all about like, who's the like super sharp, charismatic, personality.
Hey guys, Sarah Stone here. Sorry to interrupt what I'm sure is a riveting podcast episode, but Theology by the Pint needs your help to continue providing these podcasts, offering our in-person events, and growing so we can bring thoughtful conversation and the hope of the gospel to a world that's increasingly walking away from church and from faith. Now that we're a 501c3 nonprofit, all donations are tax deductible, so we've crunched the numbers, and if each listener of this episode gave just $1 for each episode you listen to, we'd put a huge dent in our annual budget. So consider giving today. Go to theologybythepint.org/give and click the link to donate. Thanks so much. And now back to our show.
Like, yeah. Like, really, we're looking for that guy, and then we're just hoping that he checks the box for character and theological acumen.
Yeah.
Which usually the bar is like super duper low, rather than what the Bible says. Like, you look at 1 Timothy 3, everything except for like 3 words is all about character. And so I hope that this will get church organizations, church planning organizations, et cetera, like cause them to like, okay, we've been saying all the right things, but are we actually abiding by
Are we looking for a would-be celebrity pastor who has enough, and when I say sex appeal, I don't mean about sex, but just is sexy, is flashy, is a great speaker, is interesting, charismatic, fun, all that kind of stuff? Or are we looking for someone that like really knows their Bible and loves their wife and is faithful and is checking in with their fellow pastors and being held accountable? Yeah. It's tough.
Yeah. Can happen to anyone.
Yeah.
So.
Well.
But it never happens in communities that aren't Christian. So that was my attempt at a segue.
Man, you got all the segues today.
Yeah.
But before that segue, I think it is interesting though that, no, you know what? I'm not going to say that. We have too many things to talk about.
I'll say this too, though. The church is doing exactly what it's supposed to do. So when this is found out, there is discipline. So for all the people that accuse the church of hypocrisy or whatever,
shoving things under the rug,
you look at Ravi Zacharias. Look at this example. Like, look, now the Ravi Zacharias thing actually, like, I think there's a lot of transparency. There has been shoving things under the rug, in the past, and that's wrong. But anyway. So sometimes Christians don't behave, they don't do what they're supposed to do, and that's not necessarily if it is hypocrisy, that just means they have a high standard to which they fail to attain, which is part of what we confess is the nature of the world, But I would say, it's impossible for there not to be 10 talent men, right, who do rise to the top, who are great teachers, who end up with big followings. Like, that's just going to happen. But I sure hope that people in our audience and Christians who go to smaller churches with more or less anonymous pastors can, appreciate them, even if
Yes.
they're not famous and
Right.
don't have a million followers.
You're talking about the
blah, blah, blah.
The pastors represented by the three of us here.
Well, yeah, I mean,
two and mine,
and,
yeah.
and really all the people involved. I mean, if they're a big name, they're not going to hang out with Theology on Tap because we're not big enough for them.
I don't know what Theology on Tap is.
Theology by the Pint. Thank you.
Yeah.
No, then on the flip side of that, like as a pastor, I haven't consciously felt a ton of.
Sorry.
As someone who is a pastor, I haven't consciously felt like the temptation to like try to make a big name, try to get on the conference circuit. But at the same time, something like this does only strengthen my resolve. Like, I just want to be a local church pastor,
Yeah.
Yeah.
And in a very real sense, I don't even want any of that. Like, I just want the focus of my ministry to be my local church, which even that is second to my ministry, to my wife and my children.
Ooh, now that's beautiful. I love that. Okay, I'm just not going to use a segue. I'm just going to get into this next article. This was sent to me by a friend, John Le Carter. If you're listening, thanks for sending this to me. The article title is Church Without God, How Some Americans Are Finding Community in Secular Spaces. So this isn't necessarily super new because I think this, when I read it, will sound like what you might think happens at, say, like a Unitarian Universalist kind of church. There's a little bit of a difference. It says, each year, the number of Americans who are leaving organized religion continues to grow. We talk about that sometimes here. According to 2024 Pew Research study, more than 1 in 4 Americans now identify as religious nuns, N-O-N-E-S, not the Catholic kind, meaning they're not part of a religion. But at the same time, many are looking for the community that religion often provides. And it goes on to say, there's this thing that they talk about in this series, this Sunday assembly, which is becoming popular, where it looks like a typical contemporary church service, but there's a clear difference. At Sunday assembly, there is no religion. I take issue with that. But anyway.
No neutrality.
Yes, exactly. Yeah. Instead, it is a secular gathering where most are atheist. And it goes on to say these people gather, and it says, at first impression, a Sunday assembly service appears to look like a typical contemporary church service, but there's a clear difference. There's no religion. Oh gosh, I just read that. I'm so sorry.
It's the way it printed. Sorry.
It says we have a TED Talk style talk. This guy explains, we do sing songs, we do sing-alongs, we tell a personal story. This might be sounding familiar because it has a lot of the same components that a church might, but again, we don't do religion, which, by the way, the definition of religion in the Bible, I think if these people understood that, they'd be like, oh no, we do that. We love, bringing comfort and deliverance to the marginalized, But the point is, these people get together and they sing and they have a talk and they have community. So they're doing church. But they're doing church without, and I think the word they're looking for is Jesus. They're doing church without recognition of a need for a savior or any kind of, following an authority other than themselves. And I think what's interesting to me about the article that actually caught my attention was the singing thing, because lots of people get together for community, right? You get together with like different clubs of people, maybe some coworkers, maybe you join. I have a friend who's an atheist that reached out, like she was like, I want to join, like, I don't know, learning another language or an art class or something, because I want people that know me that I can see every week. And I was like, oh, I have an idea about that, and she laughed, and maybe one day. But so the reaching for community is like not new at all. I have a group that I invite to my home once a month. We call it Conversations. If this appeals to you, you're welcome to join. It's for non-believers, non-Christians rather, to get together and just talk about deep things, because people enjoy doing that. And if you don't go to church, you don't get that. But the singing thing jumped out to me because there is something in us. And I think if you read the Bible, and you can if you go to school in Oklahoma, but if you read the Bible, especially in the Old Testament, it talks a lot about this being kind of a prescription for worship, and that it's kind of baked into us. I mean, there is song erupts all the time. If you read like the Exodus account, that's the first recorded song in the Bible that they sing when they're rescued. It's like, what can we do after this major thing just happened? It's almost this natural, well, let's sing about it. In fact, the rest of the podcast, we're all going to sing. Isn't that right? No, I'm kidding. But this longing to erupt in song, the fact that we can sing, the fact that there's this like musical thing that's built into us, I think it's interesting that that's part of what they're doing here. And it's like they're so close, and yet this is going to be very unsatisfying after a while. Yeah. I mean, I think they're going to find friendships, and they're going to love that, because friendships are beautiful and you need them, and that's a Christian idea too. Yeah. But it will ultimately fail them, because it's not going to offer them anything eternal, and it's not going to offer them any of the peace that the Bible talks about that transcends our understanding, and it's not going to offer them hope when they're going through a divorce or scandal at home or lose a job or any of that kind of thing. Anyway, so it's really not a very white pill thing, because I think it's going to die. But I guess the white pill is come to real church and learn about someone that, unlike your friends, can rescue you and will love you even when you're unlovable, and all of these things.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. These stories, they pop up every year or two, it seems like. And it's kind of a man bites dog story, because like there's like, I don't know, how many churches are in Houston? Like 5,000?
A lot.
Like I mean, thousands, right? And of course, nobody ever cares about them. But the moment people get together, and it's like church, but it's not church, that becomes newsworthy.
Yeah, it's a glorified book club.
I mean, this is like...
I even laughed. The whole thing is called Sunday Assembly. Assembly is literally just the English translation of, a more literal English translation of the word church, ecclesia, in the New Testament. So
neat.
You're like, we're not church. Well, you literally just called yourself Sunday Church.
Right.
You know?
There's even a thing, this isn't the whole article, but there's a thing about like, I know some people do this on other nights of the week, but we want to do it on Sundays because it was something like, we think that's important. I'm like,
well, there's like, I think it's showing like the vestiges, right? And so like even where we are, this is a conversation we've been having as a church right now, even where we are in the Heights, that we planted where we planted, we wanted to be in like one of the more postmodern secular parts of our city to reach people with the gospel. But like there's still vestiges of like Christian influence. So for example, like our church right now meets on Sunday afternoons. Well, one of the challenges is the rec baseball softball league that we do. They'd have games on Saturdays, games on Sunday afternoons sometimes. You know when they never have games? Sunday mornings. You know, and now tournament baseball is a little bit different, but the rec league. So I think you're seeing some vestiges of that. And then even I found this interesting because I was having a conversation with a friend of one of our sending churches and kind of catching up with him. And they're part of a kind of a community organization in our area that's pretty well known, that a lot of people are connected with. And he was saying how many times he's had conversations with people there that they're like, man, I really love the community here. It reminds me of church. And so part of my white pill is, yes, I think we're seeing that we cannot escape the actual bedrock of Christian truth, regardless of what you claim to believe. But I think part of the white pill, especially not only as a pastor, but as a church planter, is like, here's a missional opportunity, you know? And so like, yes, we want to preach biblically faithful sermons. We want to sing rich theological songs in our services with non-distracting excellence, you know, a minimum level of excellence, so that we're helping the congregation, not hindering their ability to engage. So not at the sacrifice of quality content in that sense, but in a real way, I think missiologically speaking, like emphasizing community more than content. There used to be the day, certainly in the suburbs, where, you know, if you just got the rock and worship band and the really charismatic speaker, your church is automatically going to grow. And that's probably still true to some degree. But how many of those people are like actually lost people coming to faith, I think is increasingly dwindling. And as our culture becomes increasingly less even nominally Christian, I don't think that is going to work. So it's like, no, we need biblically faithful sermons. We should be singing quality, rich theological songs.
Which will, by the way, sound weird. to people that aren't following Jesus. And that's maybe okay.
But one of the things that certainly we are trying to really lean into is that community piece.
Yeah.
That's a big part of everything we do. That's like an official church event. In fact, a guy that has been coming recently, who's not yet a believer, but he's searching. He's our first Google review. And the thing that he mentioned in his Google review, it wasn't the preaching, it wasn't the music, it was the sense of community and like just the warm embrace that he got from everybody in
I
the
love
church.
that.
So I think that there's a missional opportunity there. It's like, no, people are still craving this. So let's give them that. Let's build relationships with these people. And then let's figure out their hurts, habits, etc., that have caused them to punt on the actual foundation of all those things, which is Jesus.
Well, one of the quotes is, religion has harmed a lot of people. And so I get that. If people have legitimate pain from the church, I can understand why they might not want to associate with the church anymore. I mean, atheism has harmed a lot of people.
Yes, it has.
You know, I don't know, like the commies, you know, for example. And that's kind of the problem, is like they want all the fruit without the foundation, without the, I mean, community is a byproduct of Christ. And they want the community without the Christ.
Right.
And so, I don't think it'll last, but I can understand the appeal, and I'm not opposed to people seeking community and being friendly with one another, but it just goes to show like the inescapable like way that we're made, and the call that they are responding to, their own kind of nature.
And I'm with you. I think it will fizzle out.
What's that? Yeah, no, it will.
Yeah.
I think something you said is interesting. You said, like religion has hurt a lot of people. I think that's actually that's becoming more disingenuous when people say that. I think this is like, I've talked before, I think about the dog metaphor, where people are afraid of dogs, not because you were bit when you were little, but because you have a friend that was bitten. And so now they're scary to you.
Got a lot of dog biting metaphors going on. Yeah.
Really.
Because I said this was a man bites
did.
dogs. Yeah.
But I think it's become just a trope. It's become a talking point now. Like, oh, the church has hurt people. Oh, the Crusades. Oh, religion is.
That church abused people. Not me. Not anyone I know, but it abused people.
Exactly. And yes, the church, first of all, the church has done lots of terrible things. People in the church have done lots of terrible things. And people outside of the church have done a lot of terrible things. But the reason why I say it's disingenuous is because, one, people don't often feel that for any actual personal reason. Like, they have not been wounded. But B, the thing that they're really talking about is hypocrisy. They're talking about you preach one thing and you do another, and how could I ever trust? Well, but everybody does that.
Right,
like, that's the famous, the sign that like was a meme, that was a church sign that said, the church is full of hypocrites isn't true. There's always room for more.
Yeah.
Every single human is a hypocrite. We all don't do the things that we want to do. We all don't live the life that we want to live. And so to be able to look at, quote, the church and be like, oh, they're such hypocrites. You're doing it right now.
Yeah.
Like, come on board. We'll all be hypocrites together.
The only way to not be a hypocrite is to have no standards. Because a hypocrite is someone who has standards that they fail to reach.
Doesn't live to them.
So if you have no standards, okay, well, I don't have any respect for that,
Right.
And no one would actually say that. Everyone
very
wants to
few
be
people are
Everyone has
actually that
standards.
consistent, right? Yeah, exactly. Whereas like the Christian worldview, we can actually both affirm that what happened potentially was really terrible, but also explain here's why. Like, we have
sin and forgiveness.
Right.
We have the recognition of sin,
solution,
and then a solution.
Exactly
and it's a pattern, and we live through it, and that's why we have confession every week, and that's why we have communion every week. We have this pattern of life.
We're gonna make you confess.
Yeah, except on Christmas Eve or Easter, because technically we confessed on Maundy Thursday, and that's all part of one service. But that's
ooh, interesante.
Anyway. Yeah, I mean, good on them. It's hard enough, like when you have Christ as your foundation. We easily forget that too. So. What do we have next? We have lots of things going on.
So
still.
many. FEMA?
Sure,
What's
FEMA. This has been coming out. I mean, we had the massive Hurricane Helene. It went through, obviously Florida, but a lot of the real damage seems to be from the east flooding in North Carolina, and people still to this day. I mean, we're talking now a week later now. By the time we're recording this, like, are without power, they're without water, they're alone.
They're trapped often.
They're trapped. There are stories of helicopter pilots threatening to be arrested because they're, inappropriately aiding people. I've seen videos of churches now full of supplies that the government did not provide, that the authorities did not provide, that people are doing on their own.
Yeah.
I know our denomination took a 26-foot truck somewhere into that part of the world,
Appalachia,
full of, packed full of supplies. So people are doing amazing things. Meanwhile, what happened with FEMA, I mean, this is like FEMA's one job. It's right there in the name.
You had one
Emergency Management Agency. And so they have said, it is now known that in 2023, they put $364 million, and in 2024, $650 million for shelter and services program. That's almost $1 billion for non-citizen. This is from an article, by the way, in the Federalist, which is titled "Biden-Harris Admin Use FEMA Disaster Funding for Illegal Immigrants to Provide Humanitarian Services to Non-Citizen Migrants Following Their Release from DHS." That's from their own website. That's from FEMA's website. So, it's just another example where, and come to our October event where we're going to talk about who to vote for and why.
We have 2 October events. Yeah.
Yes, one in the Woodlands and one in Houston. So it's like when people feel like the one thing the government ought to be doing, and it's not even done, that non-citizens are prioritized over citizens, and it's there to see. It's not a conspiracy theory. There are $1 billion that is for emergency management, and you literally have Alejandro Mayorkas, the department head of DHS, under which FEMA is under, and he's saying, yeah, we don't have any more money. We don't have any more money for hurricanes, which is their way of saying, asking for more money, because every agency just wants more and more money. They never have enough money. NASA never has enough money. This agency never has enough money.
Education Pine never has enough money.
The Pine never has.
But we can if you go.
That's right.
So it's like, and so, we don't have it. Well, where did the money go? Mm-hmm. And in San Diego alone, there was a $20 million welcoming center for migrants.
Wow.
Like welcoming center. Like that's what you have like when you cross the state line and like you need to buy a Coke and Georgia's like, welcome to Georgia. We have a welcome center for you. Come learn about how to go do touristy things and while you're here.
It's crazy.
It's crazy.
Yeah.
It's crazy and it's immoral. I think so. Whatever argument, and I have said we need to have an immigration Theology by the Pint event where we need, because the arguments that the sort of progressive Christians make are welcome the stranger, you know, and like basically the Old Testament call of the Israelites to be kind towards those who are not Israelites.
Sojourners.
Don't marry them, but don't kill them either,
Oh my gosh. And leave, room at the edges of your field for them to glean and things like this.
So it's like, but we have at this point, it seems, and this is the argument, that there is a plan to basically flood our nation with migrants, illegal immigrants, whatever we're calling them these days, newcomers, for purposes of increasing the census count for certain states for representation, or them actually ending up on the voting rolls in some way, or just, I don't know, sticking it to those of us who still think America is a unique and wonderful place,
or sort of unculturing certain bringing different cultures in instead of this sort of assimilation.
Yeah, the whole thing with Springfield, Ohio. Yeah, and the eating the cats, kind of took over. But like the reality is, when you do flood a small town, with 20,000 people, that's 25% or so of that whole. That's bound to have ramifications and changes, and there's no process of, enculturation, or assimilation, and it feels deliberate. It feels kind of like a violent attack. And so,
and by the way, let me insert something here. We don't mean, when we say enculturation or assimilation, we don't mean like be just like us, don't be, distinct, don't have cultural, celebrations, things like that. It's things like when a friend of ours was explaining that in Haiti, like most people don't drive. It's like 1 out of, I don't remember the number, 10 people actually have a driver's license there. So then all these Haitian immigrants in Springfield, like they don't know how to drive. So they're just getting in car accidents all the time. So that's a kind of a neutral example to say like, hey, look, maybe we teach you how to drive. And maybe we say you don't get behind the wheel until you know how to drive. Yeah. Like that's how we do things in America. So when you're in America, that's kind of how we would expect for you to do things. It's like, if you come and live under my roof, you follow my rules. But it doesn't mean like don't have celebrations and cook your delicious food or something, right? It's like, let's do things in a way that everybody can like live. Yeah. Literally be alive.
Because then who is punished? I mean, your insurance rates go up. Like if you're a driver, you have to pay for uninsured motorist, right? Because it gets more expensive every day because there are more people who are uninsured who are illegally driving, and then it costs me. So the burden always seems to be falling on the tax-paying, law-abiding, hardworking citizen who's basically minding his P's and Q's. And it's like, well, you have to pay for all the people who are screwing up. No, I don't want to pay for them. I don't think that's right. I don't think that's moral to ask of that. And here you have people dying in North Carolina for want of basic supplies.
Yeah.
Like the one thing the freaking American government should be able to do is put crap on a pallet and helicopter it in somewhere.
Yeah.
We can do it in every other country around the world.
Yeah.
We've given Ukraine $100 or $200 billion to and then here's the real grift. You want to talk about grifting? Will be the trillions it will cost to rebuild Ukraine. So we love to blow up countries, and then it's like, oh, well, we're going to send our contractors over and rebuild. That's the grift. That's where the money really is. It's in the rebuilding, not in the war. And it's like when our own country and our own people, are knocking on death's door or have no hope, or we need. That is what we have a government for. If it's for one thing, it should be to go in an emergency and help people survive. And it's like basically what it sounds like is, well, we don't have any money because we gave it to non-citizens.
Yeah.
And if you're, and I would just say, I think I'm not an anarchist. I think governments should exist. I think nations should exist. I think there should be borders so that you have a specified area of responsibility, that you can have subsidiarity, you can have localized, the caring of people. It's like, but if you have a government, like this is the one thing it should do, is protect its own citizens. And to not do so is immoral. And for people to just look the other way on this and basically like approve of this invasion into our country by people who are not citizens, who, yes, are now, it is on paper, in their own words, taking resources from American citizens. I don't know how you could possibly support that. I see no justification for it. And to me, this is totally disqualifying of this administration even pursuing a second term.
So
I agree.
the counter argument that I encountered is that the money that was being given towards these immigrants was earmarked for that purpose. So they weren't taking money that was earmarked for disaster relief and doing that. But as with almost every topic we've talked about today, I feel like that's kind of missing the point. It's like the problem is, okay, well, that's good, great. But the problem is like more fundamental than that. Is like, so you can like look up that apparently, I guess FEMA's like, it's mission drift is what it is. That it has drifted from emergency management, that now they're trying to promote equity and even like climate resilience and these sorts of things. Like, why is FEMA, which, okay, let's say for sake of argument that FEMA should exist, period. Like, why is it basically being drafted into these like ideological arguments that don't seem to have anything to do on the surface with disaster relief?
From this article, FEMA's top priorities under the incumbent administration, meanwhile, do not include disaster relief among the top two goals of the Emergency Services Agency. According to FEMA's own website, the stated goals include, first, instilling, quote, equity as a foundation of emergency management, and second, quote, leading a whole of community and climate resilience.
Wow.
So my whole thing, again, my white pill is going to be like, maybe we just need to rethink the whole thing, like with the education, with all the other things. So as someone that has like more libertarian leanings, I'm like, as I look at the Bible and try to figure out, okay, what does the Bible say the purpose of government is? It's to punish evildoers and praise those who do good. So that's why I even say, for sake of argument, should FEMA even exist anyway? Because you said yourself, like, here we are, my denomination sending people. The denomination that we're associated is often some of the first people on the scene. And so maybe we just need to rethink the whole thing. And just for the record, I think both major parties have spending issues. So it's like, why are we spending that much money on anything?
I agree. Well, I will say, because I'm quite demoralized by the pro-life or non-pro-life stance of the Republican Party these days, which we've talked about at length. But now Melania Trump is, pro-abortion, good Catholic that she is, I guess. But I will say the one thing that does really warm the cockles of my heart is this probably fantasy, but I actually hope reality, that Elon Musk, who basically cut the Twitter, staff by like 90% and still seems to be doing fine. Like they talked about this Department of Government Efficiency, Doge for the Dogecoin. And, I think all that's quite brilliant. And I'm actually hoping, and actually Elon Musk said he was going to be in Butler, Pennsylvania tomorrow for Trump's return to Butler, which is all of that is mind blowing. But I'm actually really hoping that he can find the time between running SpaceX and Tesla and everything else, and be an advisor to an actual department where there are hundreds of people who know how to do this and who know how to cut the fat and help our government become efficient. And just think about the debate the other night. Like, we're sitting around talking about how the government should be providing childcare the words balanced budget never even come up anymore. Nobody even cares. Like, it's like that is the worst thing for childcare increase, is like the fact that you're deflating the dollar or inflating the dollar. And, you know, so just our priorities are all out of whack. But I am actually very hopeful that someone like an Elon Musk, who can apparently quadruple task, you know, could like cut government spending, you know, and have FEMA do like its job, which is like saving lives and getting people clean water.
Right.
Can you just do that? Is that asking too much? Clean water, some tuna fish.
Some tuna fish.
It's got to be canned food. I mean, you know,
Yes.
I'm not expecting, you know, filet mignon, you know, or whatever. But anyway, so that was disappointing. Hard segue. This was
Just say the
this
word
is
segue.
really just a tweet, not even a story. But I found it to be conflicting and kind of disturbing. And it was basically this video of Jimmy Carter, who's almost 100. No, he celebrated his 100th birthday, I guess, in October 1st or so. And they sort of wheel him out, and he looks dead.
Oh, he looks awful.
Mhm.
I mean, he looks
It's
like a
really bad.
dying person, which
Yeah.
he is. I mean, I guess we all are.
One of the things that, you know, when I did clinical pastoral education, which they used to require for pastoral students, which you do like a hospital chaplaincy or something for like a quarter, like a summer. And one of the things you do is, you know, you're around dead people, like you're helping the, you know, the morgue take bodies, and you're with families when people die in hospitals, or they're either dead or near death. And one of the things I learned right away is that people near death or dead, their mouths are not open, or their mouths
They
are
open,
are
yes.
open, right? And so whenever you see a dead person on TV, if their mouth is shut, you know, it's a bad recreation. And so here is his mouth totally agape. He can't shut his mouth. His eyes seem closed. He's wearing a hat. And part of me is like, well, you know, we live in denial of death. It's one of our chief problems. It's why people don't come to church anymore, because they think they're going to live forever, you know, in one form or another, or they're just in denial. So we don't have any service to offer them, because like, why do you need eternal life? I'm never going to die. So maybe seeing people at the late stage of life is a good thing in some way. I mean, I'm trying to put a white pill spin on this, you know, but he looked so terrible. And then what they said was, his son says his father wants to stay alive because he is so excited to cast a vote for Kamala Harris.
Sorry. I'm sorry.
He doesn't care about his 100th birthday, quote, "It's just a birthday." He said he cared about voting for Kamala Harris. And
I'm sure that's a direct quote.
that is something so deeply cynical to that those words could be said. Like,
So explain the part that you're not saying. Like
Well-
connect the dots. You
well,
don't think he actually said
He's
those
I
words?
don't-
physically.
I
He does
don't
not
think he
appear
is
physically
capable
capable,
of
much
saying
less
that.
mentally
Okay.
capable.
Yeah.
Of saying it.
And so for his son to basically wheel out the president, you know, an esteemed office in our country, and a, you know, beloved man in many respects, and a decent and good man by all accounts, and to basically like get out the vote campaign, you know, like, you
Yeah.
know, he's
a prop.
He can't wait.
Yeah.
He's a prop. He can't wait to go vote for Kamala Harris. And when he looks like this, it's like maybe he should just be in the privacy of his home and be allowed to die with some dignity.
It's so gross.
It
It's
is.
Yeah.
so gross. I actually texted Evan put this on our group thread, and I wrote back immediately and I was like, if we're still friends when I'm this age and you put a picture of me like this on social media, I will come haunt you from the afterlife. This is, I mean, it's there's no dignity, right? It's gross. It's obvious like that he's a prop for this, you know, campaign.
right.
And
Looks that way.
Oh, it's icky. Yeah.
Yeah,
That's all I have to say.
It looks like handlers are wheeling him out, you know, in a bed, and you know, he didn't look good at his wife's funeral, maybe a year ago or so. I mean, he was clearly old. His mouth was open. That's the first thing I always notice is like, oh, okay, you're near death if you can't shut your mouth, basically.
Right.
So, but you know, that was his wife's funeral. I mean, he needed to be there. You know,
Yes.
that makes sense.
Yes.
To roll him out, you know, for the cameras to see,
Photo op.
looking like this.
Yeah.
No, I think that while we are at peace with death, while we are at peace with aging, I would probably say also, yeah, keep me hidden. Like at that point, you know. So anyway, if you haven't seen it, it's worth looking up. This tweet alone had like almost 11 million views that I printed, and that was a lot.
And you have
So-
to imagine the fact that this was on like national television. That's the best they could make him look.
Yeah, yeah.
That was him being.
He has
all
a
made
hat.
up, you know,
He has a hat.
Right.
I don't know if it was a Kamala campaign hat or what, but anyway, it was sad. I'll say that. I feel badly for him, and It was sad. I'll also point out, just because I talk about this a lot when we're doing this video, that if you haven't seen the picture of Joe Biden and Joe Biden with Jimmy Carter and his wife, Rosalind, you need to Google that. You need to find it, because it's the distorted effect of being very close up, like where you're like zoomed out with a 20 millimeter camera, which is
Push
something,
in, pull back kind of.
which is something we have to do in this room because, you know, because it's a small room and stuff. And Joe Biden looks like an absolute giant, and Jimmy Carter looks like he's about 3 feet tall. So I'm just pointing that out. It's one of my favorite pictures of all time, and you should go see it. That's all. It's just and for camera nerds, you'll know what I'm saying.
Huh.
And by the way, to those watching on YouTube, do you like this? Watch this right here. Watch this. I push a button and
Hey!
Mace gets his own camera. For those of you who are only listening on podcasts, Mace has his own camera.
As a
So
pastor.
special.
Because we got a donation and we have another camera and so on and so forth. So
That's exciting.
and we still need a producer.
Just saying.
And we pay in beer and hugs.
So like if you have nothing better to do and you want to like come
An
push
unpaid
buttons for us,
internship, if you will.
and we'll even
Treasures
give you a
in heaven.
mic. You can have a producer's mic, you know, so you can chime
And
in.
producer credit.
Yeah,
put it in
sure.
the show
Oh,
notes.
Do they get to
absolutely.
do sound effects and stuff?
I mean,
Wah,
I would love to do
wah,
some. I'd love to do some drop-ins like that. Yeah, I think those are almost like out of style now, like drop-ins and stuff. Yeah.
Oh my gosh.
Bring them back.
Well, I had one.
Drop-in's great again.
I'm cool with that. I had one last story which is kind of resolved itself, but it did have some moral overtones, which is this massive union, the Marlon Brando on the waterfront strike. You know, where the dock workers were striking, and you had this kind of like, can I say this? Greaseball? Is that racist?
Why would it
is.
be racist?
I don't
The dude
know.
is white.
Anyway, kind of a
You can't be racist against white people. Thought you know that?
mob adjacent guy gives on an interview like wearing $1,000 glasses. People have like broken down the outfit, you know, like,
Oh, funny.
like one of those like, you know, you can wear it too kind of thing. And
Talk
like,
about the fit. Yeah.
you know, anyway, and basically he gives this. It kind of came out that basically like either give us what we want, which was a 77%
Hold
pay
on,
raise.
hold on. Just you
Which
said it
is
so quickly.
crazy.
We're talking about the strike that the port workers
Yeah.
were on for the last couple of days.
Couple of days,
and now
couple of days.
the pause button has been pushed on it.
Yeah,
Okay,
I think
continue.
they're going to renegotiate in January, but I don't think it's over. But it could be a political bomb,
And
you
it
know,
was
that could go off.
going to be a huge hit to
Oh yeah, $4 billion,
economy.
$5 billion a day. You know,
Yeah.
all these goods that can't get in. You could have some empty shelves.
no good
and-
Christmas shopping for
Yeah.
those of you that
So yeah, it was going to be a big deal. It's the East Coast, and as far as Houston, so there's like 50 ports or something. So yeah, it's going to be a big deal.
Okay, continue,
and
sorry.
but he gives an interview, and he basically is like, "You don't pay us what we want, we will cripple you." I mean, that's what he said. We will cripple this country. You know, basically,
is very
like
mafia-esque.
yeah, it's a threat. You know,
Mm-hmm.
and but it kind of does bring about a question of, I can understand unions. I can see the need for a union when people are underpaid. Collective
Mm-hmm.
bargaining sometimes is necessary. Collective actions. That reminds me of an entire story that we didn't even talk about.
Oh,
that
man.
I'm
Next
going.
time.
I'm going to get to, but I'm going to give the brief version after this. But anyway, I can see collective bargaining being necessary. I'm not anti-union per se, but this doesn't feel like collective bargaining for like fair pay. This
No,
feels
it's a
like
gang.
This is like, you're never going to automate our business, which is one of their sticking points, by the way, because our ports are way like behind the times on like
Yes.
automation. Like China does twice the volume we do because they've automated everything because they don't care about their workers. I got it. Like, we don't treat people like slaves in this country, but still.
We were actually at a dinner table the other day where my boyfriend, who's in the biz, was talking about just the price of like one, I'm probably saying it wrong, but like one pallet or one container being sort of delivered to the Houston port versus, what do you say, Singapore? One is like $500 and one's like $5 just because of the automation.
Yeah.
It's crazy.
Yeah.
Continue.
So it's like we want more money, even though we work slower than everybody else, which is passed on to the consumer, you know, because we pay for the increased cost of all that. And it's like, well, we have a monopoly. That's not the purpose of a union. I think the purpose of a union is to get fair market wages.
Not be put in like health, like really terrible health
Yeah,
conditions.
yeah, like kids,
coal miners
you
or
know,
something.
losing fingers, you know, in you know, textile machinery or something like that. Okay. But, you know, as Christians, do we have an obligation? Because one of the chief ways we love our neighbor, it's not just having happy feelings for them, but we go to work. And that's how we love our neighbor. Like when you're a Christian, you change their tires, you know, at the tire shop, or you're the Walmart greeter, or you're a high-powered lawyer, or a mom at home.
Yeah.
A million other things. Like those are your vocations. That's how you show love for your neighbor. And so, you know, I would think that I would like that the people like this greaseball and all the people in between him and the average dock worker, we're Christian. I'd like to think that. And that they would apply Christian theology to the situation and would say, we'd like more money. We think we need more money to keep up with inflation or something. That's fair. But saying things like, we will cripple you, like we're going to shut down the whole economy, that seems immoral. Like now he's into our territory. Now he's like making moral judgments, and he is going to punish and threaten people who are totally innocent in all this.
There's only a handful of people that can actually make the decision to even do anything for them.
Yeah.
The average American has no actual power to help them.
Right.
And you said something before we started recording about, are there some industries that ought to like not ever be able to do this? For instance, we're never going to have all of the doctors in the country just stop being doctors, right? I mean, I don't know if that's part of the Hippocratic Oath, is something that like, there's something that we're always going to do this despite conditions or something. Care. Yeah. Like, but there are certain jobs you don't ever want them going on strike because people would die.
Air traffic controllers. That was the famous one in the 80s with Reagan. And he was like, we'll replace you. We don't care. Baseball players. Whenever they strike.
Calm down. Okay. Yeah. That would actually be the opposite of what I'm saying.
By the way, I shouldn't plug other podcasts, but Tucker Carlson, his latest podcast was a medical ethicist, a pro-life medical ethicist. And it's really interesting if you're into like end-of-life questions and brain death and abortion. And it's a really interesting conversation. I think I find it interesting. So anyway.
My point is just that, yes, if you're doing something that's actually going to cripple our society, then maybe you shouldn't have that kind of power.
Yeah.
In fact, the baseball thing is a great example because when, say, the writers, Hollywood writers went on strike, it was like, well, that was a bummer. And I mean, I love binge watching TV. And so that was a bummer, but it didn't cripple us.
Yeah.
It was entertainment.
Yeah.
In the same way that I hate to say it, baseball is entertainment.
Right. I agree with that.
Okay.
I agree with that. But
it's not essential. Yeah. It's not an essential worker.
I mean, the NFL, there was I think they made a movie of the replacements. I think maybe it's a joke movie, but I think that there was a strike in like the mid 80s and there were replacement players for a couple of games.
Yeah. Oh, funny.
Yeah. But yeah, I don't know. The whole thing is unsavory. And, I would just say that as Christians, we should understand that when we go to work, that's at least one way that we show love to our neighbor.
I actually really love that. I love that you said that. It made me think of those. Do you remember? Maybe I'm the oldest one in the room for sure. Those Richard Scarry books that you would get, and it would have like the mailman and the guy that brings the milk and the mom with her kids, and show like how the whole neighborhood works together. Yeah, that's what I pictured when you said that.
Yeah.
Anyway, sweet.
And I think just the not necessarily counterpoint, but I think the flip side of that, I think that is true, and I don't think enough people think of their work, their job, as a way to love their neighbor. The flip side of that is the Bible also says the laborer is worth his wages. Yeah. I think just me personally, I'd rather let the market decide that than being strong armed.
Yes.
Yeah.
Oh gosh, of course.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And frankly, like as much compassion as I have, that's how I feel about the automation. Yeah. 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 I mean, and I'm not intimately familiar with the work that they do. I'm sure they work really hard. But it was something like the average worker, the average starting salary was like $81,000, and with overtime they can make like $200,000. And this is before the 63% increase. Well, they wanted 77. They got 63.
Yeah. Well, yeah, it was like a 50 and 77, so I guess they met in the middle.
Oh, I'm behind on the news. Dang.
What was agreed upon was a 63% increase, which again, like, I'm sure it's
hard need to rethink things
and all those sorts of things. But even like the automation thing is like, okay. And I know it's been talked about on this podcast before. It's like, while wanting to have compassion, like there are other jobs that exist.
Yeah.
And, I think we as humans have shown an ability to adapt to change.
Yeah. And see, the thing is, like, I agree. The market should determine the wage. Like, I don't know that this is the market. I don't know that basically
that's what he's saying.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
Sorry.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah. I don't know.
That's my criticism of how this.
Yeah. Holding a nation hostage is not like the market, like for pastors, for example, most church bodies will say something like a pastor should make about what a teacher makes, because you kind of have the same level of education. And it's kind of one of those roles where everyone understands you do it kind of for the love and not for the money, but a teacher gets paid.
I've heard principal. Like a principal at school, because you run the whole thing.
You want to talk about money? They make like double what teachers make, so that would be a big difference.
Well, that's what we
at
want for you guys.
At a big church, yeah, probably. But
Anyway, continue.
Anyway,
Sorry.
but but the benefits and that's like what our denomination kind of uses like a measuring guide or something, So just to put that out there. And so, yeah, I don't know. I mean, wow, I don't know. So dock workers make what, 3-4 times what your average pastor is making, I guess.
We recently heard something in the $230,000 range.
Yeah.
This is pre-strike.
Yeah. Anyway. Well, pastors never work overtime, so you got that. We got that going for us. But the other story I really wanted to talk about, but it never got printed. I did try to get it printed to a couple of places, and they said no. But it'll get printed at my my normal website. And it's basically Kamala Harris did an interview with a couple of basketball players, and I think it was a typical sort of interview. But she talks about how, like, basically no progress has been made in America without people marching in the streets. And my basic argument is that, okay, that is
false,
crazy. There has been tremendous progress in
Yes.
this country that was not the result of marching in the streets.
Yeah.
Unless the only thing you ever think about this country is how black people and white people get along,
Yeah.
which seems to be her context. But the fact that she's sitting in this $1 million home talking to two people of color who are multi-millionaires, who are both very bad people, by the way. Steven Jackson was the guy that went into the palace, Malice at the Palace, like the big fight with the, anyway, he went into the stands and beat up people at one game in the early, Ron Artest took the fall for that, but he was the second guy that did that. And the other guy has been accused of domestic abuse and some really bad things. Anyway, they're interviewing her in a actually I think it's her vice presidential home, but regardless, it's affluence. And the whole thing is just so gross because it's like no progress. Like, hello, why do you think people are coming here from all over the world? Because they want the money, they want the prosperity and the opportunity that America still barely, but still does, kind of offer. And it's like, so I'm going, what marching in the streets led to the automobile?
Yeah.
Right. What marching in the streets led to the air conditioning? What marching in the streets led to
all the innovation that we can think of?
Yeah. Or even all the things that I actually am not like a huge fan of anymore, but she would defend, like vaccines, or like the healthcare system as it exists, or the public education system, or something like that. Like she would all say those are all good things. Yeah. And so I'm going like those. But many of these things just happen organically by the faceless, nameless people who toil away, hours and hours and hours, hundreds, thousands of hours to create a better life for other people. And those are all those are all progress.
Yeah.
And the fact is, like, America's not a racist country because people of all colors come here from all over the world.
And
by the millions. Yeah.
It's funny. This is reminding me of the episode we did around the 4th of July where we all brought our 10 top things we love about America. And so many of them had to do with the way that our markets encourage innovation and creativity and for people. And because we're free and we're not fighting for our freedoms, we have the space to do things like what NASA does or, Anyway.
It's just frustrating, that it's just constantly complaining about like how awful things are.
Yeah.
And it's like, no, we've actually made a lot of progress, and hardly any of it required, rioting. And by the way, it almost sounded to me like a threat as well.
Yes,
like, you remember those George Floyd riots? We got them on call anytime.
Yeah,
we can pull them out again.
Locked and loaded.
We're not where we need to be yet. Looks like we need some more riots.
They will cripple us.
What's that?
I said they'll cripple us.
Yeah. It's a similar threat. So it just feels kind of dark and pernicious, and I don't like that. And I would say the white pill is that we've made a lot of progress, and like America's a pretty great country on the whole. It'd be good if we could get back to our former glory. So I'll just say that.
Or just be thankful for the things that we can do, the freedoms that we do have that allow us to innovate. And
gratitude is a wonderful thing.
It really is.
It's kind of like good for your soul. But,
kinda.
Yeah. I'm thankful for y'all.
Oh, say Mace.
Mace, you're gonna get your own camera just for that. and you get to say anyway, you get to tell us about the journey, where people can find you as we bring the show to
not like the journey of life.
The journey,
church, which is called the Journey.
Yes. So, Mace Perez, one of the pastors of the Journey Church Houston in the Heights area. You can find us at thejourneyhouston.org.
I don't get my own camera, but I'm Sarah Stone. You can find me at theologybythepint.org. And I go to church at Oak Forest Anglican. I don't often say that, but if you ever want to try something different and come visit my church, I'd love
Get your
that.
smells and bells on.
Yeah.
Yeah. Smells and bells without being Catholic.
But you're not allowed to leave First Lutheran to go there or to Mesa Church.
That's
but
right.
Anyway, I'm at First Lutheran. I'm Evan McClanahan. Thanks so much for listening, and until next time, we encourage you to question freely, think deeply, and disagree as needed.